from the Department of Communication in Phillipsburg. This is 30 Minutes with Government with Cedric Peterson.
Hello and welcome to this edition of 30 Minutes with Government. I'm Cedric Peterson. Prime Minister Marcel Gums welcomed Dutch Minister of the Interior and Kingdom Relations Ronald Plasterk to the island on Sunday, January 18th. Minister Plasterk was on a working visit to St. Maarten, Saba and Statia from January 18th to January 21st. On Monday, January 20th, both ministers held a joint press conference with Dutch Minister for Interior Affairs and Kingdom Relations Ronald Plasterk. The conference addressed three main topics as it relates to the installation of a dispute committee, integrity, and the draft budget of 2015.
This morning, we've had a first meeting with as one-on-one with Minister Plasterk. Thereafter, we had in here a meeting with the entire Council of Ministers, where Minister Plasterk had the opportunity to meet and talk with the entire Council of Ministers. And then this afternoon, we had a second round of talks with the Minister of Justice, the Minister of Finance, and myself, and the Minister Plasterk and his delegation. I would like to give the floor to Minister Plasterk to make his introduction talks, remarks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Prime Minister, and I think we've had very fruitful and very intense days, starting indeed yesterday with a warm reception. Thanks for that, and an entertaining evening where we had a chance to speak informally, and then we had a meeting with the full cabinet this morning. Before which actually we had a chance to talk one-to-one for an hour and go through many subjects, and since then I've had a chance to briefly meet with Parliament, with the leaders of the parties there, the fractions there, and after which we've convened with a couple of members of Cabinet, as the Prime Minister just said. Based on all of that, I think that we may have the opportunity for new momentum in the collaboration between our countries and within the Kingdom. And we fully agree on the importance of many matters that concern us and that concern at the end of the day, and that's what it's all about, the welfare of the people in the Kingdom. And of course, in this visit, especially the welfare of the people at St. Maarten. Yeah. And we've discussed several issues, but maybe you, Prime Minister, want to go first, and then I might add a few lines here and there.
Basically, we touch on several points, but the three most important points that we touch on was the dispute regulation, the integrity issue, and the budget for 2015. Let me start by the first point, where the dispute regulation is concerned. As you may know, for quite some years, the parliaments of in the countries in the Kingdom has been talking about a dispute regulation within the Kingdom. They have done this in their meetings of the epoch, quite some years now, the parliaments between Aruba, Curacao, St. Maarten, and the Netherlands. And in discussing the issue this morning, Minister Plasterk and myself, we agreed that this dispute regulation should get some more impetus into it, and we have agreed that as government, so as the executive branch of government, we will make an effort to start a discussion jointly where it concerns the dispute regulation. The intention is to continue, when Minister Plasterk meets with Prime Minister Ashes on Curacao, to bring this forward, and we see that as a positive point, because there are so many disputes that keep arising within the Kingdom, and seeing that Parliament started out looking for a format of finding a body to regulate these disputes and to get results, government agreeing now to join that effort also, we see that as a positive. As you know, there's been several disputes, but we still don't have a body to take the disputes to regulate that. We see that as a positive development. The other point on the integrity issues, as you know, on the agenda of the last Kingdom Council of Ministers last Friday, there was agenda point, the algemene maatregel van Rijksbestuur, the general measures of Kingdom measures against St. Martin. We discussed that from the day one, and we were able to get the council ministers, the Kingdom Council ministers. That point was withdrawn from the agenda last Friday. The purpose of that was to give Minister Plasterk enough space and room to start the discussion here again. It has been discussed pretty wide and broad and long, and on the integrity issue, what we have agreed upon is to have the technical staff again come back and review what is on the draft ordinance that has been prepared by St. Martin, and also see what's the contents of the general measures that is on the table from the Dutch government, and see how we could probably merge two of them or fit two of them, or find some way to get to one common ground and one common document. We're not saying it's an ongoing process, and the intention is for this week itself, the technical people to start working on that. And the other point is the budget of 2015, which you all know by now has been presented to Parliament, and that we would be hopefully starting the debate scheduled on Thursday coming in the Parliament in the Central Committee. That's from my side. I'm sure my colleague would want to elaborate a little more and give a little more details from his side on those points.
Just a brief follow-up on that, because basically I think this was a wonderful outline of what we discussed. As we say in Dutch, geschillenregeling, so the dispute regulation, indeed, it's part of the statute. So it's obligatory that there should be one, and there isn't one. And the reason for that is that there's been a dispute about how to get a dispute regulation, and there's nowhere to go if you want to regulate that dispute. So we need to sort that out, and indeed, as governments, we think we should step on it and try to see whether we can solve that. And indeed, I will meet Prime Minister Ashes of Curaçao the day after tomorrow, and also bring it up there and see what's on the table and how far we can get. Second, indeed, is the issue of integrity, where we fully agree that anybody who works in the public service, be it a civil servant or a politician, if he or she takes a decision, it should be clear that that's taken in the public interest, and only with an eye on the public interest. And we should avoid situations where there are possible conflicts of interest. And obviously, the smaller the country, the more difficult it is to ensure that, and all the more reason to pay attention to that, because it ensures the integrity of the of government at the end of the day in the country and also in the kingdom. So we're working on as the Prime Minister said, seeing whether we could find a solution that's mutually acceptable, and this will continue even this week. May I add that integrity is one issue. Another issue we've discussed at length is international crime, which also is a big concern to us all, and that with the Ministers of Justice last week, and I was a guest there at their meeting, so I was able to sit in on that session, agreed to try and before March 1st come up with a plan to tackle that in a complete justice chain and covering the complete kingdom. And that's an important area of collaboration. And finally, financial matters. The Minister of Finance, Hassink, has pointed out that the budget is now at Parliament. I had a chance to be at Parliament this afternoon and understood that indeed the Parliament wants to discuss this very seriously and as soon as possible, which is good. In addition to that, Minister Hassink has emphasized that he would like to collaborate with the Netherlands on several issues that involve expertise in finance and in taxes, and we will take that back and see how we could shape such a collaboration. In conclusion, I think it's been very fruitful, and I'm looking forward to a long collaboration with my colleague, Prime Minister Gums, in the years to come to ensure we reach the best results for the people in the kingdom.
I think that is mutual. That goes from our side also, and that we express to Minister Plasterk and to Prime Minister Rutte from the first day we were sworn in, where we are willing to work towards a better relationship within the kingdom. The kingdom is important for all of us, and we have to do that jointly with mutual respect for each other, and we have agreed to try our best in achieving that. Where the matter of integrity is concerned, I can inform you that, just to remind you, repeat, that this cabinet, we have done everything so far that is stipulated by law, and also taking into consideration the recommendations in the integrity reports, where in our Council of Ministers meeting, every one of them we have included a participation to the Council, to the members of the Council of Ministers, to make sure and remind them to check the agenda to see if there's any conflict of interest that might arise out of point that's on the agenda. And if any minister would indicate that, they would be asked to leave the meeting when such a point is being discussed. Also, the declarations, according to the Article 2 and 3 of the integrity law, that says that ministers must comply with certain regulations within 30 days. We have complied with that last Friday, and we did deliver those declarations from the incoming ministers to not only the Council of Advisors, but also the Audit Chamber, the General Audit Chamber, and we've also complied with the electoral law on financing political parties, where we delivered our declarations within 30 days to the Electoral Council. So that is proof that we are on our way to complying with the law. And as I've said to everyone, it's not about complying with the law to satisfy no one outside of St. Martin, neither to satisfy Mr. Plasterk, but to satisfy the people of St. Martin and to comply with the laws that are there on the books. And that's the intention that we intend to follow in this government as much as possible.
With the current state of affairs surrounding the neglect of our children in our society, 30 Minutes with Government visited the Court of Guardianship and spoke to the department head, Mrs. Rochelda Rodriguez Emmanuel, who explained the functions of the department, the laws that govern the department, and youth rehabilitation.
First of all, the Court of Guardianship falls within the Ministry of Justice, and it serves as a child protection service and youth rehabilitation service. It is established by law. The framework for the functioning of the task of Court of Guardianship is within our civil code. So it's not something that has been then thought out that we can go out and do anything that we want out there in the community. But all our tasks and responsibilities are actually guided by the civil code of St. Martin, but also the penal code. There are certain information pertaining to the task and responsibility and the role of the Court of Guardianship, and that is for the country St. Martin. And internationally, we are guided by the rights of the child, the Convention of the Rights of the Child. So as country, we are signatory to the Convention of the Rights of the Child through being part of the Dutch Kingdom. And so we have to adhere to the rules and the regulations or the guidelines of the Convention of the Rights of the Child. But we also have to, of course, adhere to our own laws, which is the civil code for civil cases and the penal code for cases where, you know, that, for instance, minors with the law. But in principle, the Court of Guardianship task and responsibility, if we look at all child protection services throughout the world, there are certain core business that remains the same. So a child protection service or board in the English-speaking islands within the Caribbean, or Raad van de Kinderbescherming, as we know it in Holland, they have certain core task and responsibility that is throughout the same. And again, embedded based on the rights of the child. If we have cases where a minor is being suspected of committing a crime, then also the Court of Guardianship is present, not only at the court hearing, but actually has a role prior to that, because the Youth Probation Office and Youth Rehabilitation task is via the penal code given to the Court of Guardianship. So what happens then? a minor is taken into custody by the police. The police or the prior prosecutor, officially the prior prosecutor, would send us it's called a berichtgeving. They will send us information saying, I have a minor in custody and for this and this reason, and the court of guardianship has to then go and interview that minor or do a research pertaining to the social environment of that minor. So we don't do investigation. Did they walk with a knife? Yes or no? Did they commit that crime? Did they thief? None of that. But we have to answer to the prosecutor, who is this minor? Is he or she in school? What is the environment? Where are the parents? With who did they commit it? Is this the first time? All those kind of things. Are the circumstances? What is the mindset of the child? Do you need a psychological report? And if this minor would have to get a measure put in place, what do you advise? Aggression regulation training? What do you advise? Counseling, rehabilitation in a facility, or drug rehabilitation. So we would make a report again, interviewing parents, school, the minor, and putting that on paper, and that goes to the public prosecutor. And based on our report and whatever crime they committed, the report of the police, the public prosecutor would then decide, am I going to give a warning? Am I going to take this to court, to a judge? Or would I just, and what measure, what would I request as being, a suitable continuation for this minor? And with minors, again, based on the rights of the child, you always work on rehabilitation. You don't work on locking them up in prison. You try to rehabilitate.
The Department of Communication will bring the full interview with the Court of Guardianship to you in a subsequent broadcast. Stay with us. You're watching 30 Minutes with Government.
It's that time again where we pay our motor vehicle tax and get our new license plate for the year. The following is the official price list, which includes the price of the license plate. For drivers with license plate designation M and P, you pay 287 guilders and 50 cents for gasoline type vehicles and 762 guilders and 50 cents for diesel type vehicles. For drivers of license plate designation SXM, MR, PAR, and L, you pay 287 guilders and 50 cents for gasoline type vehicles and 762 guilders and 50 cents for diesel type vehicles. For drivers with license plate designation taxi, you pay 287 guilders and 50 cents for gasoline type vehicles and 562 guilders and 50 cents for diesel type vehicles. For drivers with license plate designation R, you pay 312 guilders and 50 cents for gasoline type vehicles and 762 guilders and 50 cents for diesel type vehicles. For drivers with license plate designation bus, G and T, 35 passengers or less, you pay 287 guilders and 50 cents for gasoline type vehicles and 562 guilders and 50 cents for diesel type vehicles. For drivers with license plate designation bus, G and T, 35 passengers or more, you pay 1,262 guilders and 50 cents for both gasoline and diesel type vehicles. For drivers of license plate designation V, with a weight less than 3,500 kilograms, you pay 287 guilders and 50 cents for gasoline type vehicles and 762 guilders and 50 cents for diesel type vehicles. For drivers with license plate designation V, with a weight more than 3,500 kilograms, you pay 1,262 guilders and 50 cents for both diesel and gasoline type vehicles. For drivers with license plate designation Z, with a weight more than 3,500 kilograms, you pay 1,262 guilders and 50 cents for both gasoline and diesel type vehicles. For drivers with license plate designation for motorbikes MF, you pay 207 guilders and 50 cents. For drivers with license plate designation for mopeds MF, You pay 57 guilders and 50 cents. That was the official price list, which includes the price of the license plate for 2015. Please be reminded that the deadline for paying your motor vehicle tax for 2015 is Saturday, February 28th, 2015. Don't be late. Pay for your plate. This public service announcement was brought to you by the Department of Communication and the Tax Administration Receiver's Office.
The Ministry of Public Housing, Spatial Planning, Environment and Infrastructure are busy executing critical projects which started in 2014 from the floodgates to the paving of the Chincactus Road. According to Head of Public Works Department, Mr. Claudius Buncamper, these projects are to be completed during the first quarter of 2015.
You have to take it like a funnel. Take a funnel, throw a lot of water into a funnel. It cannot pass through the funnel fast enough so it will overflow on your table. If you're filling a bottle using a funnel and you throw too much of water, it overflows and it falls on your table. Remove the bottle head and cut it off and just have a big bucket there. When you throw the water into the bucket, it can absorb it right away and you have no spillage. That is the concept of the flooding. The floodgate was a nozzle. It was like a funnel for us. Too much water coming from one direction cannot pass fast enough through the funnel. And by now expanding it twice the size, based on the calculations of IHE UNESCO, using a 100-year storm, so that would be 152 millimeters of rainfall per hour, 6 inches per hour, that water can pass that floodgate. If it comes down, it can pass. Using the whole cul-de-sac basin, all the hills, using all that area as falling capacity, the water can pass the floodgate. Now what we have to do as soon as we're finished with that floodgate is go back and start fixing the rest of the Zegas Gut Trench. The Corralito Trench has to be finalized. The trench through Mary Frances has to be finalized. The trench behind Emilio Wilson, the path behind Retreat, going into the Academy School, that has to be finished now. Government has to make priorities. We have to do those trenches. If we don't do them, then buying the pumps and building the floodgate is wishful. It will not solve the ultimate problem of flooding. So, but there are more things, because this goes further than just catching the water. We have to make serious zoning requirements. Stop building in the hills for crazy. Stop cutting roads and in the hills or just cutting off sides of the hill to make your house. We have to agree to how we're going to do this as not only a government, but as a community also. Because very often, government gives a ruling and people just break the law and say, yeah, but the government didn't tell me nothing. When you don't have enough people to do the enforcement, it becomes a problem, and it doesn't justify it. But it doesn't justify that you break the law either. So, it's a two-way street. If we can't work together, then it's not going to work. Government has to work with the community. There's no ifs and buts about that.
The Chincactus projects. Give us a little bit of a historical background and where we are right now on that.
Chincactus is one of the projects I would say that I am not very proud of as a department head, because the people suffered sometimes unnecessarily. We made mistakes, for sure. As a department, we made mistakes. We had allowed the contractor, for example, to start when we were not really, we thought the paperwork was done. We can blame other people, but at the end of the day, the buck stops by me. I should have done my homework better. They started, and because of the rainfalls, the roads got damaged. The people couldn't get to their place easily. There are families living there that for years, because this case even reached the ombudsman, for years, again, it is one of those projects that was tied to capital investment. And so only until last year, May, June, I believe, the budget was released. We had the tenders done. We got approval for it and everything, but the contractual agreement was not finalized with the company. It's the same company that was building Foga. So, we had hoped. There were some hiccups in there, I must say, from both sides, but at the end of the day, government should carry its responsibility. We cannot push that off on a contractor. The responsibility was by us, in particular by me, and that's why I said I wasn't too proud, because the mistakes were made that we could have prevented them, and we could have prevented the people them some unnecessary heartaches. Saying that, though, I must proudly say that we are pushing that project very hard, because it's a twofold project. It's drainage is being put in completely to move all the water out of that area, because Chincactus is one of these funny roads. It's like an L, like an S, but it has a drive that continues going down into people's homes. We have to ensure that that water doesn't continue running down in there. So we have to create a major catchment at the top and catchments in the middle of the road to get the water to Rolandes Canal at the end of the day.
When can we expect this project to be completed?
The concrete road building project is already ongoing. That was approved prior to Gonzalo, because Gonzalo didn't strike at that point in time, and that was capital investment. I believe 16 roads were approved to be built. And we are in the process. We did a couple of them in St. Peter's, I know. We are busy with some of them right now in Cole Bay and in Cape Bay, and there are other areas, I believe, Middle Region and Sakagarden. Don't hold me to that, but there are a couple of other areas where roads are being built, are going to be built. I believe there are 16 roads in total. That project didn't suffer a setback, with the exception of one road. We had an issue with boundary lines, and when the road was staked out, it seemed to have been on people's property, so I immediately stopped the construction of that road. The people came in the meantime, have granted government permission to use their land to build the road, because the value of their property goes up. Once you have a concrete road in front of your property, the accessibility becomes much easier, much better. Your property value goes up. So they saw that and they agreed, and they turned over a parcel of their private land to government in a form of usage that we can then build the road on.
That brings us to the end of this edition of 30 Minutes with Government. For video on demand of this and all DCOM programming, we invite you to visit the official government website, www.stmartingov.org. On behalf of all of us here at the Department of Communication and the Government of St. Martin, I'm Cedric Peterson. Thanks for watching.